to the scroll, he found the place in Isaiah where it says this. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because He has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, to the recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord. Wow. He's setting out. Now, if he was President of the United States, this would be an inaugural address. Right? Here's what I'm going to do in my administration, in my term of office. How long is our normal term of office? 4 years. How long was Jesus's? 3.5. It's close, isn't it? But he is laying forth, here's what I'm going to accomplish. And what is it that is here? What is he going to do? To preach. Where's all the verbs in here? To heal. We're parsing sentences, young people. We're looking for verbs. That part of speech that speaks of action and doing. He's going to preach and to heal. Oh, and to preach and to heal. Set at liberty them that are bruised. Is that healing again? If you're bruised and you've been liberated from your bruise, I think that's healing. Heal. Well, there's a lot of healing in these words. And Jesus was the healer, wasn't he? Isaiah 35. Let's go to Isaiah 35. You know where in Isaiah this was that he was reading from? Now, the words here in Luke are a little bit different. It's Isaiah 61. Let's go there first and just compare what the Old Testament words, when they're translated into English, say in Isaiah 61, the very first verse, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. Well, that's the same, because the Lord has anointed me to preach good tidings unto the meek. Well, the poor, the meek and the poor, they kind of go together. That's the same. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted. That's a little different. To heal, bind up, to heal. That's pretty much the same idea. Proclaim liberty to the captives, opening of the prison to them that are bound, instead of the bruised. Well, but a lot of healing was in here, and this is spoken very clearly in chapter 35 of Isaiah. Isaiah 35 and verse 4. This is a prophecy. Say to them that are fearful, be strong, fear not. I think of Jesus every time I hear those words, fear not, because he said that more than anybody else. Fear not. Fear not. He's always telling people, fear not. Watch how many times Jesus says, fear not. Fear not. Behold, your God will come, even God, with a recompense, with vengeance. He will come and save you. He's a Savior. Then the eyes of the blind will be opened, and the ears of the deaf shall be unstopped. Or as you sing it in the Messiah, unstopped. He's going to heal. He's going to... And verse 6, the lame man shall leap as a hart, or as a deer, as an antelope, and the tongue of the dumb shall sing. He's healing. Why does Jesus heal? Well, let's see. He's going to do a lot of healing. He healed lepers. 10 of them. One of them came back and said, thank you. He healed the blind, the lame, the dumb, the deaf. But also, many people, in studying the life of Jesus and the parables that he told, the acts that he did, and the healing, they have noticed, and this is true, just like our story for the young people this morning, how many times did Jesus heal people on the Sabbath day? It's a pop quiz. What number of times? Carolyn knows the answer. She went through all the 7s this morning. Well, they are. Matthew 12, verse 10. Matthew, you can go through these real quick. There's a common theme that runs through here. Matthew 12, verse 10. And there was a man whose hand was withered. And they asked him, those who were in the synagogue, the verse right before that, verse 9, he's in the synagogue. They said, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath day? You know, the Pharisees had made all these rules about things you could and couldn't do on the Sabbath day. They pretty much paralyzed you. You couldn't. If you smiled, you're using too many muscles because it takes less muscles to smile than frown. Isn't that it? If you frown, don't frown on the Sabbath. Okay. Anyway, so they asked him, "Can you heal?" Is it okay to heal on the Sabbath day? 'Cause somebody's got to work, I guess, to heal. And is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath day? And he says, what man shall there be among you if he has a sheep and the sheep goes in the pit? Now, your laws say there's an exception to every rule. And one of the exceptions was, if I've got one of my expensive animals that's caught and it's the Sabbath, that's okay, because you can't suffer the loss of livestock. You know, that would be terrible. So it's okay. But not a human being. You know, that's the point Jesus is trying to make. Like, you do this for an animal, and he turns to the man. How much more is better a man than a sheep? Verse 12. And he says, whether it is lawful to do well in the Sabbath days? He says, stretch forth your hand. Well, man couldn't. He had not been able to stretch forth. His hands all withered, crippled, drawn up, contracted. He's got contractions, contractures. Why? Maybe he's had a stroke, and this side of his face doesn't work, and this side, and his hand doesn't work, and he's all drawn up. And he just puts his hand right out. Well, that caused quite a stir. And Mark 1, 12 to 16, the man with an unclean spirit, they did the same thing, and he cast them out right there. Is it better to have a disturbance, this person that's fallen down and frothing at the mouth and carrying on and disrupting the service, or give him freedom from this evil spirit that's afflicted him for who knows how long? Set him free on the Sabbath. Mark 6, verse 1 and 5. All manner of diseases. All these people came in. Everything. Nothing uncurable when Jesus is in town. And it's the Sabbath, and he heals them. Luke 13, 10 to 13. This woman's bent over. She's got a severe kyphosis. Her vertebral bodies have collapsed, and she's just bent into. Looks like she's picking up things off the floor, but that's the way she is all the time. She just walks that way. And Jesus heals her on the Sabbath day. 18 years she'd been this way. Luke 14, 1 through 4, the man with dropsy. Well, we think this refers to dependent edema. Fluid accumulation all around the ankles and the lower legs, and it can be quite disabling. Not to speak of the heart failure that most often causes it. Or maybe he's got some obstruction of his lymphatics. Whatever the cause was, he healed him. The swelling's gone. He can get around. He's relieved on the Sabbath day. John 5, verse 9, the paralytic at the pool of Bethesda. You know that story. 38 years this man's been laying there. And he doesn't have anybody help him down to the pool, when they believed that if there was a rustling on the water, an angel had done that. And the first one in, I'll heal him. And if you don't get in the water, too bad. Well, what kind of an arrangement is that? We have mineral springs and hot pools and places that people go for, anybody gets in that water and can get the benefit. Well, they believed this. It seems like a superstition to me. But Jesus was there seeking out the most pitiful case. Who needs my help the most? And he found this man, 38 years, whose problem may have been self-inflicted. There's some suggestion that, as we understand the natural course of syphilis, ends in its most advanced stages, degeneration of the spinal cord, tabes dorsalis, and you're paralyzed. And this man's living here with the guilt of not just his paralysis, but what caused it. And he wants relief, not only to walk again, but to know that he's forgiven. Jesus, like the man brought through the roof, forgives his sins first, then he makes him whole. And he does this on the Sabbath day. Well, talk about a stir. I think we ought to look at this one. It's in John chapter 5. Let's go there real quick. John chapter 5. And the end of this whole discourse describing what he does, he tells him to pick up his bed and walk, and he does, and they see him carrying his bed on the Sabbath. Another no-no. You can't do that. And he says, well, the man who healed me told me to do this, told me to take up my bed and walk. And man, I haven't walked in 38 years. I'm going to do what he said. I'm going to obey his word. If he can do that to me, I am going to follow him. And he does. And they come to Jesus. They know who did this. I mean, who else can heal people? And he's always doing it on the Sabbath. They know who he... So they come to him. They find him in the temple. And they say, you know, you've done this on the Sabbath day. Verse 17. But Jesus answered them, my Father works until now, and I work. What is he saying? My Father has worked until now, and I work. Did the Father heal people on the Sabbath day until now? Now Jesus heals on the Sabbath day? What kind of work does the Father do? Everything. And he does it by his Son. Well, we're gonna look at that here. They do it together. Now, what he's making a statement. My Father works and I work. What he does, I do. And he's going to expand on that just in a few verses. And they say, verse 18, well, they want to kill him even more. They want to kill him more than they wanted to before. They wanted to kill him before, but now they want to kill him even more, it says. They sought all the more to kill him. Because he not only broke the Sabbath, but he said that God was his Father, making himself equal with God. Now, is Jesus equal with God? Yes! And they recognize why. That wasn't the problem. It was that he claimed to be the Son of God, making God his Father. Because God works and I work. My Father works and I work. Now, has the Father and the Son always worked together? Yes. And he's going to show them this. As he goes on, he says, Son can do nothing of himself. Whatever he sees the Father do, that's what the Son does. And verse 20, for the Father loves the Son and has shown him all the things that he himself does. He will show him greater works than these, that you may marvel. For as the Father raised up the dead and gives life to them, so the Son gives life to whomever he will. You know, like Father, like Son. It's a very old saying. And that's what Jesus is saying. I do what my Father does. Isn't that what children do? They see their parents. They want to do what Daddy does. You know, do what Mommy does. So, why did Jesus pick the Sabbath to do a lot of it? 7 times he healed on the Sabbath. Because the Sabbath is the day that memorializes and commemorates His creative power. And it takes creative power to heal people. The same power that brought this world into existence and created everything on it is the same power that heals the sick and restores them to wholeness, back to life. And Jesus has that power. Oh, yes, the Bible tells us this. Power in the blood, we sang that. Did we sing that? Yeah, we sang that. Power in the blood. There's power in the cross, too. 1 Corinthians 1, verse 18. 1 Corinthians 1:18. Power in the cross. We're going to sing that for camp meeting. That's our camp meeting choir song. 1 Corinthians 1:18. For the preaching of the cross is to them that perish foolishness, but unto us which are saved, it is the power of God. The preaching of the cross is the power of God. The blood of Jesus has power to save. His Word has power to create and to heal. It's the power of the Creator. The Son of God is also the Word of God, right? John chapter 1, verse 1, you all know that verse. In the beginning, this is just like Genesis 1:1, right? John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. Now, that's just what Jesus had gotten through saying. My Father works and I work. We do it together. I am with Him, and everything He does, I am with Him. I do what He does. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. And the Word was God. He is God. He came from the Father. He got everything the Father has. 100% God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by Him. Oh, now here we're going to start down a little trail. Remember these words. By Him. By Him. All things were made by who? The Word. Jesus. We know this is Jesus because it goes on to say, in Him was life, and He is the light that shines in the darkness, and then the Word was made flesh, verse 14. Well, who became flesh? Jesus became flesh. In the fullness of time, God sent forth His Son, made of a woman, made in the flesh. He took on our flesh. He became fully man, fully God, combining those two natures. By Him. But by Him, all things are created. Now, let's look at Colossians chapter 1. This is Paul's letter after the Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians chapter 1, verse 15. This is talking about Jesus, the dear Son. In verse 13 it says, we're translated into the kingdom of His dear Son. Verse 15, who is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of every creature. For by Him were all things created. By Him. And then the verse ends up, all things were created by Him and for Him. You see that over and over. Now let's look at Ephesians 3, verse 9. Let's just go back about 2 books, maybe. Philippians, Ephesians, chapter 3, verse 9. Very end of that verse, it's talking about the mystery, which is hid from the beginning of the world, hid in God. God who created all things. Oh, wait a minute. I thought the Word created all things. God created all things by His Son, Jesus Christ. That's what it says, right? God created all things by Jesus Christ. So the Father works and I work. They do it together. Father gives him, it's a beautiful illustration in the Old Testament of David and Solomon. You remember, David wanted to build a temple. The sanctuary had been out in the wilderness in a tent, and it was still in a tent at his time that Moses had made the tent of the tabernacle congregation. He wanted to give it a permanent home, and he had these plans drawn up and everything. And God said, you got too much blood on your hands, but your son shall build my house, and he shall be the one that shall build the temple and so on. So David gave the plans and all the instructions, and he went out and gathered all the raw materials. He got everything, got all the cedars of Lebanon, Hiram up there, and gold, and all the raw materials. But Solomon did the building. Solomon made the house. So the Father, did David build the temple? Well, he designed it. He provided everything necessary for the construction of it. But the Son actually did the building. Same thing in creation. God who created all things by Jesus Christ. And these are not the only places. This is over and over and over. Hebrews chapter 1, verse 2. Hebrews chapter 1. Okay. It starts right out in verse 1. God, this is talking about God who speak in the past by the prophets, and in the last days is spoken by his Son, verse 2, whom he has appointed heir of all things, by whom also he made the worlds. Not just the world, the worlds. So God, who created all things by Jesus Christ, created the worlds by Jesus Christ, by his Son. And let's go over to the faith chapter while we're here in Hebrews, chapter 11. Hebrews 11, verse 3. Through faith, this is the faith chapter, through faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the Word of God. Well, that's what John said. The Word, all things were made by him. The Word was with God in the beginning, and all things were made by him that were made. The worlds were framed by the Word of God. And how did the Word do this? Psalm 33, verse 6. Psalm 33. Verse 6. By the word of the Lord. Who's the word of the Lord? By the word. In the beginning was the Word was with God. By the word of the Lord were the heavens made. All the host of them by the breath of his mouth. He's saying the same thing twice. What's the breath? The wind that comes out of your mouth is what comes out. When you speak, and you got to be careful because it'll pop if you get too close to the microphones. All that wind coming out can make noises. By the breath of, he's saying the same thing twice. When he speaks, then we'll go to verse 9. For he spake, and it was done. He commanded, and it stood fast. That word done is added. He spake, and it was. That's creative power. You didn't have to get down with your hands and chisel something out. You just speak the word only, the centurion said. Right? Greater faith have I not seen in all Israel than someone who just says, speak the word. You don't have to come and do anything. I know that you are a man of authority. You can speak and it will happen. What faith! We should trust in the Creator of the universe that he can speak. All he needs to do is speak. And it will happen. His word. We rely, we trust, and we depend on his word. 1 Corinthians 8:6. Here's another by. Let's review it so far. All things are made by him. By him were all things created. by whom God created the worlds. God created all things by Jesus Christ. We understand that the worlds were framed by the word of the Lord. By the word of the Lord were the heavens made. One more by. 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 6. I think we mentioned this last time. We'll look it up and look at the words here. And he's talking about in verse 5 that there's a lot of different gods that people believe in. And many lords. Lords many, he says. But to us, he's talking about to those who believe in Jesus, right? And his Father, there is but one God, the Father, of whom are all things, or from whom, of whom, from whom. He's the source. The Father provides everything. And the Son, and one Lord, by whom, one Lord, Jesus Christ, by whom are all things, and we by him. Every time it's talking about the Son, he is the one by whom the creative power is performed. The Word, he's the creator. He's the healer. And so all healing that Jesus did on the Sabbath day, he was exercising that by whom power that his Father, the of whom source, gives him. Because he says, all power is given unto me in heaven and earth. Who gave it to him? His Father. And he is the one by whom all this happens and takes place. So he heals the paralytic by the pool of Bethesda. He's said, you can't make such a claim. You do that, you're making yourself equal with God. Well, he was equal with God. And this is nothing new for Jesus. This has been going on for a long time. Let's turn to Proverbs chapter 30. I know these are all familiar texts to many people, but I want to go through this sequence when we're in reference to the Sabbath and the power of the Sabbath, because there is creative power on this day that's not seen in other days. Jesus demonstrated that in his own life. Let's look at Proverbs chapter 30, verse 4. Now this is describing something. You tell me what this is talking about. It's asking some questions. Who has ascended up into heaven or descended? Who has gathered the wind in his fists? Who has bound the waters in a garment? A garment made of water? Why? Can you think of something that is clothed with water? Huh? Atmosphere? Oh yeah, the water's above and the water's beneath. Genesis 1, in creation. Well, they call, now that we've got space stations and satellites and Voyagers who can turn their cameras back on Earth and see it from a far distance, and even had cameras on the moon taking pictures of the Earth. They call this planet what color? The blue planet. Why? Water. We have water. And as we look at the other planets, they're not blue. Although there's some thought that some of the distant ones may be frozen and have some frozen water on them. But it doesn't, you got to be just right. We're in the Goldilocks zone, as they call it, right? Not too close to the sun, not too far away, just right. Well, what is this? Okay, he has bound the waters in a garment, who has established all the ends of the earth. Wow, who established the ends of the earth? The one who made the earth, right? So this is creation language. We're talking about creating the earth. And then the question is answered. What is his name? And another question. What is his son's name, if you can tell? So the one who established the earth had a son, and they worked together. Jesus was referring to his Father worked until now, and I work. That until now started a long time ago with the creation of the world, and before that. And this is one evidence of that in the Old Testament. What is his name? The Father's name, because he has a son. And what is his son's name? We're talking about establishing the ends of the earth. Now, the same language is used a few chapters earlier. If you go to chapter 8, Proverbs chapter 8, and look in verse, talk about, say, verse 24, or 23. Set up from everlasting, from the beginning, or ever the earth was. Okay, we're talking about the very beginning, right? In the beginning was the Word. Wherever the earth was, when there were no depths, we're talking about the oceans. There was no oceans. I was brought forth. There were no fountains bounding with water before the mountains were settled, before the hills were brought forth, so on. All this is describing the earth and what it was before it was created. And as he had not made the earth, he has had yet not made the earth, verse 26, nor the fields, the highest part of the dust of the world. When he prepared the heavens, I was there. When he set a compass upon the face of the depth, or the oceans. What's putting a compass on the face of the depth? This far and no further, right? The shoreline. The water can come up to here and stop. And when he established the clouds above, and he strengthened the fountains of the deep, and when he gave to the seas his decree that the waters should not pass his commandment, same language again, when he appointed the foundation of the earth. That's almost exact same thing as you see in chapter 30. It's established the ends of the earth. He set the foundation, he appointed the foundation of the earth. I was by him as one brought up with him, and I was daily his delight. The Son was there with the Father, working together in the creation of the earth. By the Word, by the Son, by Jesus Christ, God created all things. And we see that in all these places as we look into the Old Testament. And Psalm 136, this is an interesting one. While we're in Proverbs, have you left Proverbs yet? Sorry. Proverbs 3. Let's go to Proverbs 3. We're trying to save you from looking all over the place. But Proverbs 3, verse 19, says that the Lord by wisdom has founded the earth. By understanding hath he established the heavens. So who is speaking back here in chapter 8 when he says, I was with him? And I was by him, as one brought up with him. If you look in verse 12, I think it's verse 12, let's see here, chapter 8. Verse 12 says, I, wisdom, dwell with prudence and find out knowledge of witty inventions. And so wisdom is speaking here. And who is wisdom? Might have to go to New Testament to find that out. Let's go to 1 Corinthians again. We're jumping all over the place. But these things, they come to my mind, and I'm trying to think of them in order. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 24. Christ crucified, 23, stumbling block to the Jews, foolishness to the Greeks. But them that are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. He is the power of God because he is the one by whom the Father has accomplished all the works of creation. By whom are all things. And he is the wisdom of God. So that's why in Proverbs 3:19 it says that by wisdom he has founded the earth. And let's see, Psalm 136. There's what I was starting to go to. This is another by wisdom text. Psalm 136. Psalm 136. This is a great one. We ought to do this with music sometime, because the end of each phrase, there's this echo. Somebody shouts out the first part of the verse, and then the second part of the verse, everybody responds. For his mercy endureth forever. Every verse does this. Well, I want to focus on verses 3, 4, and 5. Oh, give thanks to the Lord of lords, for his mercy endureth forever. To him who alone doeth great wonders, for his mercy endureth forever. To him that by wisdom made the heavens. By who? By the Word, by wisdom, by the power of God. He is the wisdom and the power of God. And he goes on, talks about he made the great lights, for his mercy endureth forever. The sun to rule the day, for his mercy endureth forever. The moon and the stars to rule by night, for his mercy endureth forever. All the way through here. Echo, echo, echo. That'd be great to do with big choir echoing the back. And when the Father and the Son had finished their work of creation, we've got to go to Genesis for that. Let's go to Genesis chapter 2. Genesis chapter 1 is where they created everything. And when we get to chapter 2, big celebration. Whew, the work is over. Chapter 2, verse 2. And on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God had created and made. So it's sort of a little sandwich there. It talks about all the work that he had made. He's resting because of all the work he had ended, and he blessed it and sanctified it, because he had ended all the work he had rested. He says it again. What does it mean to sanctify? Can you sanctify something? How do we sanctify things? Do we sanctify things? No. Set apart. Why do we set it apart? Set it apart from what? From the things that are not sanctified, right? So there are some things that are not sanctified. They're not holy. But something that is for holy use, we set it apart from sanctified. God sanctified this day, set it apart, blessed it, and he rested on it. Well, the same thing is, I guess what we should notice is that this is the first thing in the whole Bible that is identified as holy. The first holy thing in the Bible was not a holy mountain. It wasn't a holy building. It wasn't a holy temple or an altar or a shrine. It was a holy time, a holy day. An appointment, a palace time with God. And he wanted this to, he has now finished making all these things, all these environments for all the things that he has filled in those environments. And the crowning work of creation, man, has been made in the very end of the last day. And now he wants to spend time with his creation and revel in the beauty and the happiness and the joy. What does it say in Job chapter 1? And the sons of God shouted for joy. When creation, when the world was made. And 2,000 years later, over 2,000 years later, when it was time to bring the people who had gone down. This is going to carry on from your Sabbath school lesson. They're down in Egypt. They've been in slavery for a long time now. And their cry goes up to God, and he hears it, and he says, Moses, go down there and tell Pharaoh, let my people go. Get them out. He brings them out of Egypt. Short story. They come out. With a strong hand, with power, mighty works. Miracles are performed there. And it says in Nehemiah chapter 9, verse 14. I'll just read it for you here. He says, you have made known unto them, he made known unto them his holy Sabbath. Nehemiah 9:14. Which Sabbath was this? He made known to them. They didn't know about his Sabbath. For almost 400 years, they had been suppressed and in slavery, enslaved, and nose to the pyramid, to the grindstone. They had lost knowledge of God and his way and how to worship him. And Moses was sent back to restore them. And part of restoration is to release people. That's why Jesus released people from their diseases on the Sabbath day. The Sabbath is a day of restoration and freedom and release. And the Exodus is a large-scale example of that. I don't have any evidence. The Bible doesn't tell us what day of the week the Exodus was on. But if you count through the account, beginning with chapter 12, and you follow each of their encampments for 1 week, and it says they came out of Ramses, and they traveled to Sukkoth, and they camped there. And then they, in chapter end of 13, verse 30, they journeyed from Sukkoth, and they camped at Etham, on the edge of the wilderness. Day 2. Second verse of chapter 14, and he says, "Turn and encamp at Pihahiroth, between Migdal and the sea, over against Baal Zephon." And so that's day 3. And middle of the week, we have a midweek prayer meeting because the Egyptians have caught up with them. 3.5 days. Something happens every time 3.5 days comes along. 3.5 days, and in the middle of that night, the Egyptians come in. They got the mountains on either side. The sea is in front of them. There's nowhere to go. And the Israelites cry to Moses, verse 12, chapter 14, why didn't you just leave us alone and let us serve the Egyptians? It would be better for us to serve the Egyptians than to come out here and die in the wilderness. And now they're crying. But this pillar of fire that has been leading them by night, it's the middle of the night now, goes over them and comes down between them and the Egyptians. And the army comes to a screeching halt. And they can't go any further. The way is blocked. And now Moses is instructed, put his staff out over the waters divide. You've seen it in the movies, and they go through, and the cloud lifts. Egyptians said, charge! Out in the middle of the Red Sea, the waters come back. And the horse and his rider are drowned in the sea. Song of Miriam. That's midweek. Okay, and then they go on, and day 4. Where's 4? Here we go. They travel 3 days. Okay, if you've been 3 days, midnight, they say you go through. Now you're going to go 3 more days, and that's in chapter 15, verse 22. So now they go on through the wilderness of Shur. They went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. Now they're at the Meribah, bitter waters. They're going to try to drink the water. They're thirsty. I'm thirsty. Roberto's thirsty. He came and got some water. They can't drink the water. It's brackish water. It's salty water. Oh, man. And so Moses is instructed to cut down a tree and cast it into the water. Tree cast into the water, and the waters become sweet, pure. Jesus carrying his cross, a tree, to Calvary, said to the women weeping for him beside along the road, "Don't weep for me. If they do this to a green tree, what will they do to a dry?" Jesus was that green tree, the living tree, that was cut down and cast into the waters that we might drink the water of life. And that happened on the 6th day. When was Jesus crucified? We understand it's the day before the Sabbath, and he rested in the tomb on the Sabbath day. And the people went home and they rested also according to the commandment. So Jesus rested in the tomb on the Sabbath, and the next day, verse 27, they came to Elim where there was 12 wells and 70 palm trees. 70 palm trees. 12 wells, one for each tribe. And they rested. It's an oasis. It's beautiful. What an experience to have on the Sabbath after a week like that. I have no proof. He doesn't tell us what day of the week, but the symbolism of the Sabbath is strong in Elim, and it's a week after coming out of Egypt, which is a day of release and freedom from being a slave. You know, the very first statute given after the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments were given Exodus 20, of course, and the next chapter, chapter 21, the very first verse says, "These are the judgments which I shall set before the children of Israel." Number 2, verse 2, "If you buy a Hebrew slave, 6 years you shall serve, and the 7th he shall go out for nothing." This is the law of the Hebrew slave. 6 years he shall serve, and the 7th year he gets set free. Goes free. Let's back up. We're right here in chapter 20. Here's the Ten Commandments. Right in the middle of the Ten Commandments. The largest commandment of all. It takes up more words than any of the others. It's the only commandment that tells us how to keep it. It's the only commandment that tells us who the Creator is. It's the only commandment that tells us to remember. I saw you saying that. And we want to remember. He wants us. What do we read? What was that text there? And his wonderful works are to be remembered. And in this commandment, it says, verse 11, "For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and all that in them is." As we saw in Genesis chapter 1, and then in chapter 2, the very second verse there, "and rested the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it." Isn't that what it said in Genesis chapter 2, verse 2 and 3? He blessed the day and sanctified it. That's to make it holy. He hallowed it. He sanctified it, made it holy. Same thing. So this is an echo of Genesis. At the very end of time, there is again going to be a restoration of the Sabbath. In Isaiah 58, let's turn there real quick, because this is a prophecy and a promise. Isaiah chapter 58. Start with verse 12. "And those of thee, they that shall be of thee, shall build the old waste places. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations. Why were they raising up foundations? What happened to the foundations? Somebody's tore them down. And so they're building them back up again. And you shall be called the repairer of the breach. What was the breach? Break. It's a breach. You have a breach in the dam. That's kind of how we use the word nowadays. If you have a breach in the dam is breached, what happens? It breaks. And water leaks out. Restore of paths to dwell in. What happened to those paths? People had gotten off the path. You got to get back on the path. And so they're going to restore the paths. They're going to repair the breach and build up the foundations. Verse 13, if you turn away your foot from the Sabbath. So you don't want to have your foot on the Sabbath. What does it mean if you have your foot on the Sabbath? You're walking on it, yeah? You're trampling on it. Turn your foot away from the Sabbath, from doing your pleasure on my holy day. Who's speaking here? The Lord shall guide thee continually. Satisfy thy soul. Verse 11. On my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy of the Lord, honorable. You shall honor him, not doing your own ways, nor finding your own pleasure, nor speaking your own words. We have a whole day to spend with the Father and His Son, the ones who created everything that there is. And what a delight that can be. Then thou shalt delight yourself in the Lord, and I will cause thee to ride upon the high places of the earth. Wow, you want to ride high? You heard easy rider. This is high rider. Ride high upon the face of the earth. And the very end, there is going to be those who restore the paths, build up the foundations, repair the breach, restore. Because things have been lost sight of, they've been broken down. And Revelation, the very last book of the Bible, tells us that this is going to happen. Let's turn to Revelation chapter 14. We know this is at the very end. It's just before Jesus comes. Because in verse 14, Revelation 14, verse 14, it says, I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and upon the clouds one sat like the Son of Man. Who is this? You remember in Matthew chapter 24, Jesus gives the signs of his return. And the disciples asked him, tell us of your return and the destruction of the world. Because he said, one stone of the temple should not be upon another. That must certainly be the destruction of the world. So he answers them that the Son of Man should come in the clouds of heaven, and then shall all the tribes of earth mourn when they see him. And he shall send forth his angels and gather them, his elect, from one end of the earth to the other. So this is talking about that event, right? The Son of Man sitting on the cloud and having in his hand a golden crown on his head, and in his hand a sharp sickle. He's got a golden crown and a sharp sickle. So this is Jesus coming in the clouds of heaven. Now, let's back up a few verses. Go back up to verse 6. I saw another angel, or messenger, flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel. He's preaching to everybody in the world. This is a worldwide message. Saying with a loud voice, fear God, give glory to Him, for the hour of His judgment is come. Wow. And I think the world needs to know about that. And worship Him. Who? The one who made heaven and earth, the sea, and the fountains of waters. That's an echo of Exodus chapter 20, we just read. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is. Heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of waters. So there is going shortly before Jesus comes in the clouds of heaven, there is this message that goes out. Is it any surprise then that it's only been within the last 150 years that Darwin and evolution has been so prominent on the world scene? Do you think that there's a reason why suddenly the attention of men would be drawn away from the Creator to, well, we kind of created ourselves. That's really what evolution boils down to. We are the product of chance and random selection and mutations and the survival of the fittest. Even though 99.99% of all mutations are not good, most of them are deadly. Those that may result in some variation are the only ones that can survive. If you have a mutation that results in something radically different structurally, that's death to that organism. But anyway, there's great hope that that has the capacity to do what God did. But at the end, this message goes out. Worship Him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and the fountains of waters, the Creator. The Father, of whom are all things, and His Son, by whom are all things. The power and the wisdom of God. That's who I choose to worship. I hope you have been strengthened in your belief and conviction that the Sabbath is a special day for reuniting that belief in the Creator. What a marvelous time, a delight that we can have resting in Him.